John Paul II, when he would teach the university students in Poland, the women in the class would be like, well, surely he must have been married or at least engaged. Like, how could he know us so well? Well, he knew them well because he listened well. There was a woman who is a human rights activist who suffered greatly under communism and I believe also Nazism. And she really struggled with understanding faith in God and wrestled because of a lot of that suffering. And her friend was able to arrange an opportunity for her to have a private meeting with Pope John Paul II. And they sat down for a long time together. And then this woman came out of the meeting in tears of just joy. And the woman said, well, what did he say to you? And she said, he's the most extraordinary man I have ever met. And she said, well, why? And she said, he listened to me. And that was the genius of John Paul II. He knew that what we had to say was more important than what he had to say. And he really felt that way. And so you have this man who spent years listening with not just his ears, but his heart, camping with young people on these trips, young married couples. And they say of the 50 to 60 young engaged married couples that would go on these canoeing trips with him in Poland, there was a divorce rate of 0%. None of them got divorced. And when you learn what it is that he was teaching them in the wilderness, then it becomes obvious why.
One of the main points of John Paul II's teaching was that women were getting a raw deal from the sexual revolution.
There was one instance where John Paul II was addressing a number of bishops. And after this meeting out of the bishops, one of them, Bishop Darcy of Indiana, came to him and said, Holy Father, there's one word that struck me during your address is attractive. Like, how do we make these difficult moral teachings attractive to the modern world? And he said, John Paul became very serious, like a philosopher, and gave a response that Bishop Darcy said is forever embedded in his heart. He said, John Paul said to him, it is necessary to understand the soul of the woman. He said, all of these things that have promised to liberate her, premarital sex, contraception, and abortion, have they not enslaved her? But that one power-packed little sentence, if you want to understand this whole issue, you first have to understand the soul of the woman. And if you don't get that, you're not going to get the rest of it.
Somewhat paradoxically, in understanding the soul of a woman, John Paul II started by affirming the beauty and dignity of the woman's body.
What I love about it is that it's counterintuitive. You think, well, if there's an emphasis on the body as evil or sexual excesses, the solution you'd think would be to focus on the soul and spirituality and prayer. It's not what John Paul II did. He focused on the body and the goodness of the body, and the body as an integral part of who we are, and not an instrument, not an external, kind of widget that I use at my will, but I am a body and I am a soul. And so it's that integration that powers the message of the theology of the body.
It was this love of the body that led John Paul II to take the loincloths off the nudes in the Sistine Chapel.
Yeah, when Michelangelo originally painted the Sistine Chapel, people got pretty upset about it in the Vatican, saying, this is like a stew of nudes. This belongs in a tavern or a brothel, not a papal chapel, all this nakedness. And so as soon as Michelangelo died, because he wouldn't do it in his life, they had many of them painted over. They chiseled out Saint Blaise, his whole head out of it, and changed the direction of it so he would be looking away from Saint Catherine of Alexandria, who was nude. And so they had all these renovations. And John Paul II said, no. Purity is not about spending the rest of your life avoiding the sight of the human body. Purity is about seeing the glory of God in and through the human body. And so he ordered these restoration artists to go through and peel away the years of the soot and the grime, and to be able to take off many of these loincloths and restore it to its glory. And in many senses, that's what he did to the church's teachings on sexuality. That many of them had been encrusted under these countless misunderstandings and just a confused notion of what the church really taught. And he kind of peeled that away so we could see God's original design for human sexuality and all its beauty and all of its glory.